Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Conk's Corner, the show where I am continuously surprised. I'm reading Harry Potter every single day. I've been doing it since the beginning of COVID quarantine. This is a space where we just listen to a story and interact with a story. No outside politics or anything that's worrisome is being brought in here or in the chat. It is just about relaxing and connecting. I have not read the books before. Please don't spoil anything in the chat or in the comments. That means anything up until now that has not been revealed or anything from the Potterverse. I don't need to know it. Not yet. We are very close to the end, I'm assuming here. We had a crazy episode with revealing all of Snape's past and how that changes completely how we view him. Somebody's birthday again. Renee, your birthday. You rhyme with birthday. That's why you're Renee. Happy birthday. All right, let's get started, shall we? Get the old bing bang boom going on. And we will begin. We ended at the end of the chapter last time of chapter 33. Next chapter is called The Forest Again. It's like she was writing, she was like, ugh, we're back in the forest. All right, let's get started. Chapter 34, The Forest Again. Okay, let's see, what kind of music? For now, I'll just put the regular music on. Actually, no. Here, I know what I'm gonna do. I know. It's still nighttime, it's not dawn quite yet. We're gonna get started. Finally, the truth. Lying with his face pressed into the dusty carpet of the office where he had once thought he was learning the secrets of victory, Harry understood at last that he was not supposed to survive. Oh yeah. Oh, I was so caught up with Snape's thing that I forgot to think about this. That the whole goal of Harry going through this whole process was to die. Yikes. His job was to walk calmly into death's welcoming arms. Along the way, he was to dispose of Voldemort's remaining links to life, so that when at last he flung himself across Voldemort's path and did not raise a wand to defend himself, the end would be clean, and the job that ought to have been done in Godric's Hollow would be finished. Neither would live, neither could survive. He felt his heart pounding fiercely in his chest. How strange that in his dread of death, it pumped all the harder, valiantly keeping him alive. But it would have to stop, and soon. If beats were numbered, how many would there be time for, as he rose and walked through the castle for the last time, out into the grounds and into the forest? Terror washed over him as he lay on the floor, with that funeral drum pounding inside him. Would it hurt to die? All those times he had thought that it was about to happen and escaped, he had never really thought of the thing itself. His will to live had always been so much stronger than his fear of death. Yet it did not occur to him now to try to escape, to outrun Voldemort. It was over. He knew it, and all that was left was the thing itself, dying. If he could only have died on that summer night when he had left number 4 Privet Drive for the last time, when the noble phoenix feather wand had saved him. If he could only have died like Hedwig, so quickly he would not have known it had happened. Or if he could have launched himself in front of a wand to save someone he loved. He envied his parents' death now. This cold-blooded walk to his own destruction would require a different kind of bravery. He felt his fingers trembling slightly and made an effort to control them. Although no one could see him, the portraits on the walls were all empty. Slowly, very slowly, he sat up, and as he did so, he felt more alive and more aware of his own living body than ever before. Why had he never appreciated what a miracle he was? Brain and nerve and bounding heart. It would all be gone, or at least he would be gone from it. His breath came slow and deep, and his mouth and throat were completely dry. But so were his eyes. Dumbledore's betrayal was almost nothing. Of course, there had been a bigger plan. Harry had simply been too foolish to see it. He realized that now. He had never questioned his own assumption that Dumbledore wanted him alive. Now he saw that his lifespan had always been determined by how long it took to eliminate all the Horcruxes. Dumbledore had passed the job of destroying them to him, and obediently he had continued to chip away at the bonds, tying not only Voldemort, but himself to life. How neat, how elegant, not to waste any more lives, but to give the dangerous task to the boy who had already been marked for slaughter, and whose death would not be a calamity, but another blow against Voldemort. And Dumbledore had known that Harry would not duck out, that he would keep going to the end, even though it was his end, because he had taken trouble to get to know him, hadn't he? Dumbledore knew, as Voldemort knew, that Harry would not let anyone else die for him now that he had discovered it was in his power to stop it. The images of Fred, Lupin, and Tonks lying dead in the Great Hall forced their way back into his mind's eye. And for a moment, he could hardly breathe. Death was impatient. But Dumbledore had overestimated him. He had failed. The snake survived. One Horcrux remained to bind Voldemort to the earth, even after Harry had been killed. True, that would mean an easier job for somebody. He wondered who would do it. Ron and Hermione would know what needed to be done, of course. That would have been why Dumbledore wanted him to confide in two others, so that if he fulfilled his true destiny a little early, they could carry on. Like rain on a cold window, these thoughts pattered against the hard surface of the incontrovertible truth, which was that he must die. I must die. It must end. This whole writing is really, really good. She's so good at writing thought processes. And you know, everything he's thinking about Dumbledore, it's all true. It's all valid. I'm trying to see the other side, which is like, everything he's describing, none of it is false. He did all those things. But yeah, I'm trying to think about motivations. I mean, he himself gave his life for this purpose. It's just that Dumbledore didn't give him the clarity all the way. And I know he's saying, well, if I told him at the very beginning, he wouldn't be there, and then he couldn't kill Voldemort, and then Voldemort would kill everybody else. So I get I get why he's doing it, right? Going away from that clarity and giving that full honesty, which he said he would do. That was the unfair part. In the book 5, I think it was, he said, no more lies. He didn't say lies, just pure honesty now, and he didn't give that. So there are certain flaws about this. And also, what if he did tell Harry this? One thing he's not doing is he isn't trusting Harry's resolve and loyalty. He's not trusting Harry enough to tell him the truth about this. Right? So because maybe he did tell Harry, and Harry would have surprised him with his character and saying, well, if that's the job, I'm going to do it. Right? He didn't trust him enough early on. So I still think Voldemort's a really good person. Still think Dumbledore. I still think Dumbledore's a really good person. I still think Dumbledore did the right thing, but did it in the wrong way. If that makes sense. Yeah. All right. Where are we? Ron and Hermione seemed a long way away in a far-off country. He felt as though he had parted from them long ago. There would be no goodbyes and no explanations. He was determined of that. This was a journey they could not take together, and the attempts they would make to stop him would waste valuable time. He looked down at the battered gold watch he had received on his 17th birthday. Nearly half of the hour allotted by Voldemort for his surrender had elapsed. He stood up. His heart was leaping against his ribs like a frantic bird. One second, I gotta take a drink from my vase glass. He stood up. His heart was leaping against his ribs like a frantic bird. Perhaps it knew it had little time left. Perhaps it was determined to fulfill lifetime's beats before the end. He did not look back as he closed the door. The castle was empty. He felt ghostly striding through it alone, as if he had already died. The portrait people were still missing from their frames. The whole place was eerily still, as if all its remaining lifeblood were concentrated in the great hall where the dead and the mourners were crammed. Harry pulled the invisibility cloak over himself and descended through the floors, at last walking down the marble staircase into the entrance hall. Perhaps some tiny part of him hoped to be sensed, to be seen, to be stopped. But the cloak was, as ever, impenetrable. Perfect. And he reached the front doors easily. Then Neville nearly walked into him. He was one half of a pair that was carrying a body in from the grounds. Harry glanced down and felt another dull blow to his stomach. Colin Creevey, though underage, must have sneaked back just as Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle had done. He was tiny in death. A kid. Colin Creevey, that sweet, sweet kid. That sucks. A little limp body. That's awful. Oliver Wood. Don't remember Oliver Wood's voice at all. You know what? I can manage him alone, Neville, said Oliver Wood, and he heaved Colin over his shoulder in a fireman's lift and carried him into the great hall. Neville leaned against the doorframe for a moment and wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. He looked like an old man. Then he set off down the steps again into the darkness to recover more bodies. Harry took one glance back at the entrance of the great hall. People were moving around, trying to comfort each other, drinking, kneeling beside the dead, but he could not see any of the people he loved. No hint of Hermione, Ron, Ginny, or any of the other Weasleys. No Luna. He felt he would have given all the time remaining to him for just one last look at them. But then, would he ever have had the strength to stop looking? It was better like this. He moved down the steps and out into the darkness. It was nearly 4 in the morning, and the deathly stillness of the grounds felt as though they were holding their breath, waiting to see whether he could do what he must. Harry moved towards Neville, who was bending over another body. Neville. Blimey, Harry. You nearly gave me heart failure. Harry had pulled off the cloak. The idea had come to him out of nowhere, born out of a desire to make absolutely sure. Where are you going? Alone? Neville asked suspiciously. It's all part of the plan, said Harry. There's something I've got to do. Listen, Neville. Harry! Neville looked suddenly scared. Harry, you're not thinking of handing yourself over? No, Harry lied easily. Of course not. This is something else, but I might be out of sight for a while. You know Voldemort's snake, Neville? He's got a huge snake. Calls it Nagini. I've heard, yeah. What about it? It's got to be killed. Ron and Hermione know that, but just in case they... The awfulness of that possibility smothered him for a moment, made it impossible to keep talking. But he pulled himself together again. This was crucial. He must be like Dumbledore. Keep a cool head. Make sure there were backups, others to carry on. Dumbledore had died, knowing that 3 people still knew about the Horcruxes. Now Neville would take Harry's place. There would still be 3 in the secret. Just in case they're busy, and you get the chance, kill the snake. Kill the snake, Harry repeated. All right, Harry. You're okay, are you? I'm fine. Thanks, Neville. But Neville seized his wrist as Harry made to move on. We're all going to keep fighting, Harry. You know that? Yeah, I... The suffocating feeling extinguished the end of the sentence. He could not go on. Neville did not seem to find it strange. He patted Harry on the shoulder, released him, and walked away to look for more bodies. Harry swung the cloak back over himself and walked on. Someone else was moving not far away, stooping over another prone figure on the ground. He was feet away from her when he realized it was Ginny. Please, the person moving, not the figure on the ground. Oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness. And at the end of the page, too. Nice little page cliffhanger where you're not sure who it is. Nice little tension. That was a jerk move. I hated that. I really, really hated that. I hated it so much. Nope. Don't do that. They'll be like, oh, Ginny could be dead. But I don't want to know who's on the ground. He stopped in his tracks. She was crouching, because if Ginny died, that would be, like, relentless on Harry's heart. Just relentless. Bam, bam, people dying. Snape, I misunderstood Snape. And then you're also bound to die. And here we go, Ginny's dead. Thank goodness. Thank goodness it's not Ginny. He stopped in his tracks. She was crouching over a girl who was whispering for her mother. It's all right, Ginny was saying. It's okay. We're going to get you inside. But I want to go home, whispered the girl. I don't want to fight anymore. I know, said Ginny, and her voice broke. It's going to be all right. Ripples of cold undulated over Harry's skin. He wanted to shout out to the night. He wanted Ginny to know that he was there. He wanted her to know where he was going. He wanted to be stopped, to be dragged back, to be sent back home. But he was home. Hogwarts was the first and best home he had known. He and Voldemort and Snape, the abandoned boys, had all found home here. Ginny was kneeling beside the injured girl now, holding her hand. With a huge effort, Harry forced himself on. He thought he saw Ginny look around as he passed and wondered whether she had sensed someone walking nearby, but he did not speak, and he did not look back. Hagrid's hut loomed out of the darkness. Gavin, someone hug this boy. Indeed, someone give this boy a good hug. Hagrid's hut loomed out of the darkness. There were no lights. Oh, please let him live! No sound of Fang scrabbling at the door. His bark booming in welcome. All those visits to Hagrid, and the gleam of the copper kettle on the fire, and rock cakes, and giant grubs, and his great bearded face, and Ron vomiting slugs, and Hermione helping him save Norbert. He moved on. And now he reached the edge of the forest, and he stopped. A swarm of Dementors was gliding. Flippin' Dementors. A swarm of Dementors was gliding amongst the trees. He could feel their chill, and he was not sure he would be able to pass safely through it. He had no strength left for a Patronus. He could no longer control his own trembling. It was not, after all, so easy to die. Every second he breathed, the smell of the grass, the cool air on his face, was so precious. To think that people had years and years, time to waste, so much time it dragged, and he was clinging to each second. At the same time, he thought that he would not be able to go on, and knew that he must. The long game was ended. The snitch had been caught. It was time to leave the air. The snitch. His nerveless fingers fumbled for a moment with the pouch at his neck, and he pulled it out. "I open at the close." Breathing fast and hard, he stared down at it. Now that he wanted time to move as slowly as possible, it seemed to have sped up, and understanding was coming so fast it seemed to have bypassed thought. This was the close. This was the moment. He pressed the golden metal to his lips and whispered, "I am about to die." The metal shell broke open. He lowered his shaking hand, raising Draco's wand beneath the cloak, and murmured, "Lumos." Oh, what is going to happen here? This is a whole nother twist. I don't know what's going to happen. The black stone with its jagged crack running down the center sat in the two halves of the snitch. The resurrection stone had cracked down the vertical line representing the elder wand. The triangle and circle representing the cloak and the stone were discernible. Oh, 1 second here. The black stone with its jagged crack running down the center sat in the two halves of the snitch. Okay. The resurrection stone had cracked down the vertical line representing the elder wand. The triangle and circle... I'm sorry, but what? The resurrection stone? Where's this coming from again? Please, somebody explain this without ruining it. Lois, if you can give me an overview. I'll just keep on reading. Maybe it'll be explained. The Deathly Hallows. Oh, the stone. Okay, yes. The Elder Wand, the stone, and the cloak. Oh, she was carrying around the stone with him the whole time. Okay, so the resurrection stone? Does that mean if Harry could die, he's going to get resurrected? And again, Harry understood, without having to think. It did not matter about bringing them back, for he was about to join them. He was not really fetching them. They were fetching him. He closed his eyes and turned the stone over in his hand 3 times. He knew it had happened, because he heard slight movements around him that suggested frail bodies shifting their footing on the earthy, twig-strewn ground that marked the outer edge of the forest. He opened his eyes and looked around. They were neither ghostly nor truly flesh. He could see that. They resembled most closely the riddle that had escaped from the diary so long ago, and he had been memory made nearly solid. Less substantial than living bodies, but much more than ghosts, they moved towards him, and on each face there was the same loving smile. James was exactly the same height as Harry. Huh? He was wearing the clothes in which he had died. My gosh, I just completely forgot what the stone does, but now it's sort of... Wow, okay. So it's actually them, right? It's not the copies of in the pictures, it's actually them in substantial body ghost form, right? It brings back people you love, but is it actually them, or is it the copy of them like it is in the pictures? Because It's a ghost form of them. Yes. Yeah, I know they're not actually alive, but it's actually them. It's not a copy version of them. Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. That is pretty wonderful. Holy smokes. Okay, I'm going to keep on reading, cuz he gets some time with his loved ones. Oh, this is lovely. Lovely gift from Voldemort. They were neither ghosts nor truly flesh, he could see that. They resembled most closely the riddle that had escaped from the diary so long ago, and he had been made nearly solid. Less substantial than living bodies, but much more than ghosts. They moved towards him, and on each face there was the same loving smile. James was exactly the same height as Harry. He was wearing the clothes in which he had died. Dumbledore, my bad. And his hair was untidy and ruffled, and his glasses were a little lopsided, like Mr. Weasley's. Sirius was tall and handsome, and younger by far than Harry had ever seen in his life. He loped with an easy grace, his hands in his pockets, and a grin on his face. Lupin was younger too, and much less shabby, and his hair was thicker and darker. He looked happy to be back in this familiar place, scene of so many adolescent wanderings. Lily's smile was widest of all. She pushed her long hair back as she drew close to him, and her green eyes, so like his, searched his face hungrily, as though she would never be able to look at him enough. "You've been so brave." He could not speak. His eyes feasted on her, and he thought that he would like to stand and look at her forever, and that would be enough. "You are nearly there," said James. "Very close. We are so proud of you." "Does it hurt?" The childish question had fallen from Harry's lips before he could stop it.
"Dying? Not at all,"
said Sirius.
"Quicker and easier than falling asleep." "And he will want it to be quick. He wants it over,"
said Lupin. "I didn't want you to die," Harry said. These words came without his volition. "Any of you... I'm sorry." He addressed Lupin more than any of them, beseeching him. "Right after you'd had your son, Remus, I'm sorry."
I'm sorry too," said Lupin. "Sorry I will never know him. But he will know why I died. And I hope you will understand. I was trying to make a world in which she could live a happier life."
A chilly breeze that seemed to emanate from the heart of the forest lifted the hair at Harry's brow. He knew that they would not tell him to go, that it would have to be his decision. "You'll stay with me?" "Until the very end," said James. "They won't be able to see you?" asked Harry.
"We are part of you,"
said Sirius.
"Invisible to anyone else."
Harry looked at his mother. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. My gosh. This is so beautiful. And he set off. The Mentor's chill did not overcome him. He passed through it with his companions, and they acted like Patronuses to him. And together they marched through the old trees that grew closely together, their branches tangled, their roots gnarled and twisted underfoot. Harry clutched the cloak tightly around him to the darkness, traveling deeper and deeper into the forest, with no idea where exactly Voldemort was, but sure that he would find him. Beside him making scarcely a sound, walked James, Sirius, Lupin, and Lily, and their presence was his courage, and the reason he was able to keep putting one foot in front of the other. His body and mind felt oddly disconnected now, his limbs working without conscious instruction, as if he were a passenger, not a driver, in the body he was about to leave. The dead who walked beside him through the forest were much more real to him now than the living back at the castle. Ron, Hermione, Ginny, and all the others were the ones who felt like ghosts as he stumbled and slipped towards the end of his life, towards Voldemort. A thud and a whisper. Some other living creature had stirred close by. Harry stopped under the cloak, peering around, listening, and his mother and father, Lupin and Sirius, stopped too.
"Someone there,"
came a rough whisper close at hand.
"He's got an invisibility cloak. Could it be?"
Two figures emerged from behind a nearby tree. Their wands flared, and Harry saw Yaxley and Dolohov peering into the darkness, directly at the place Harry, his mother and father, and Sirius and Lupin stood. Apparently, they could not see anything.
Definitely heard something," said Yaxley. "Animal, do you reckon?"
That headcase Hagrid Dolohov cannot Russian. That headcase Hagrid kept a whole bunch of stuff in here, said Dolohov, glancing over his shoulder. Yaxley looked down at his watch.
"Time's nearly up. Potter's had his hour. He's not coming."
"And he was sure he'd come. He won't be happy."
"Better go back,"
said Yaxley.
"Find out what the plan is now."
He and Dolohov turned and walked deeper into the forest. Harry followed them, knowing that they would lead him exactly where he wanted to go. He glanced sideways, and his mother smiled at him, and his father nodded encouragement. They had traveled on mere minutes when Harry saw light ahead, and Yaxley and Dolohov stepped out into a clearing that Harry knew had been the place where the monstrous Aragog had once lived. The remnants of his vast web were still there, but the swarm of descendants he had spawned had been driven out by the Death Eaters to fight for their cause. A fire burned in the middle of the clearing, and its flickering light fell over a crowd of completely silent, watchful Death Eaters. Some of them were still masked and hooded, others showing their faces. Two giants sat on the outskirts of the group, casting massive shadows over the scene, their faces cruel, rough-hewn like rock. Harry saw Fenrir, skulking, chewing his long nails. The great blonde Roll was dabbing at his bleeding lip. He saw Lucius Malfoy, who looked defeated and terrified, and Narcissa, whose eyes were sunken and full of apprehension. Yeah, that's what you get. Every eye was fixed upon Voldemort. Every eye was fixed upon Voldemort. Who stood with his head bowed and his white hands folded over the Elder Wand in front of him. He might have been praying or else counting silently in his mind. And Harry, standing still on the edge of the scene, thought absurdly of a child counting in a game of hide-and-seek. Behind his head, still swirling and coiling, the great snake Nagini floated in her glittering, charmed cage like a monstrous halo. When Dolohov and Yaxley rejoined the circle, Voldemort looked up.
"No sign of him, my lord,"
said Dolohov. Voldemort's expression did not change. The red eyes seemed to burn in the firelight. Slowly, he drew the Elder Wand between his fingers.
"My lord!"
Bellatrix had spoken. She sat closest to Voldemort, disheveled, her face a little bloody, but otherwise unharmed. Voldemort raised his wand to silence her, and she did not speak another word, but eyed him in worshipful fascination.
"I thought you would come," said Voldemort in his high, clear voice, his eyes on the leaping flames. "I expected him to come."
Nobody spoke. The Russian accents are so good. My parents are Russian. Oh, if you can like the stream or the video, that'd be very helpful. Thank you very much. Nobody spoke. They seemed as scared as Harry, whose heart was now throwing itself against his ribs as though determined to escape the body he was about to cast aside. His hands were sweating as he pulled off the invisibility cloak and stuffed it beneath his robes with his wand. He did not want to be tempted to fight.
"I was, it seems, mistaken," said Voldemort.
"You weren't." Harry said it as loudly as he could, with all the force he could muster. He did not want to sound afraid. The resurrection stone slipped from between his numb fingers, and out of the corner of his eyes he saw his parents, Sirius and Lupin, vanish as he stepped forwards into the firelight. They're gone. It's just him now. At that moment, he felt that nobody mattered but Voldemort. It was just the two of them. The illusion was gone as soon as it had come. The giants roared as the Death Eaters rose together, and there were many cries, gasps, even laughter. Voldemort had frozen where he stood, but his red eyes had found Harry, and he stared as Harry moved towards him, with nothing but the fire between them. Then a voice yelled, "Harry, no!" He turned. Hagrid was bound and trussed. Oh, God, he's alive. Tied to a tree nearby. His massive body shook the branches overhead as he struggled, desperate. "No! No! Harry, what are you—"
"Quiet!"
shouted Roll, and with a flick of his wand, Hagrid was silenced. Bellatrix, who had leapt to her feet and was looking eagerly from Voldemort to Harry, her breast heaving. The only thing that moved were the flames and the snake, coiling and uncoiling in the glittering cage behind Voldemort's head. So Hagrid is still alive. One second, sorry. All right. Harry could feel his wand against his chest, but he made no attempt to draw it. He knew that the snake was too well protected, knew that if he managed to point the wand at Nagini, 50 curses would hit him first. And still, Voldemort and Harry looked at each other, and now Voldemort tilted his head a little to the side, considering the boy standing before him, and a singularly mirthless smile curled the lipless mouth.
"Harry Potter,"
he said, very softly. His voice might have been part of the spitting fire.
"The boy who lived."
None of the Death Eaters moved. They were waiting. Everything was waiting. Hagrid was struggling, and Bellatrix was panting, and Harry thought inexplicably of Ginny and her blazing look and the feel of her lips on his. Voldemort had raised his wand. His head was still tilted to one side, like a curious child, wondering what would happen if he proceeded. Harry looked back into the red eyes and wanted it to happen now, quickly, while he could still stand, before he lost control, before he betrayed fear. He saw the mouth move, and a flash of green light, and everything was gone. Well, that was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Thank you for listening. this was a great journey, and I hope we can do it again. Because, yeah, it ended exactly like I thought it would. It's a bit abrupt, but yeah, we'll get to the next book at some point. All right, let's keep going. Chapter 35, King's Cross. Could you imagine? Could you imagine the revolt and riots in the streets? Chapter 35, King's Cross. All right, where are we going from here? No funny, says Danny. Thomas Roy, Harry Potter and the Boy Who Dies. Okay, let's keep going. He lay face down, listening to the silence. He was perfectly alone. Nobody was watching. Nobody else was there. He was not perfectly sure that he was there himself. A long time later, or maybe no time at all, it came to him that he must exist, must be more than disembodied thought, because he was lying, definitely lying, on some surface. Wait, maybe he actually got killed right there. Maybe he actually got killed. Maybe he's in like the place where you choose which way you're gonna go. If you're gonna become a picture or a ghost or something, or just move on. Therefore he had a sense of a touch, and the thing against which he lay existed too. Almost as soon as he had reached this conclusion, Harry became conscious that he was naked. Convinced as he was of his total solitude, this did not concern him, but it did intrigue him slightly. He wondered whether, as he could feel, he would be able to see. In opening them, he discovered that he had eyes. He lay in a bright mist, though it was not like mist he had ever experienced before. His surroundings were not hidden by a cloudy vapor. Rather, the cloudy vapor had not yet formed into surroundings. The floor on which he lay seemed to be white, neither warm nor cold, but simply there, a flat, blank something on which to be. He sat up. His body appeared unscathed. He touched his face. He was not wearing glasses anymore. Then a noise reached him through the unformed nothingness that surrounded him. The small, soft thumpings of something that flapped, flailed, and struggled. It was a pitiful noise, and also slightly indecent. He had the uncomfortable feeling that he was eavesdropping on something furtive, shameful. For the first time, he wished he were clothed. Barely had the wish formed in his head, then robes appeared a short distance away. He just wished for it and they appeared? He took them and pulled them on. They were soft, clean, and warm. It was extraordinary how they had appeared, just like that, the moment he had wanted them. He stood up, looking around. Was he in some great room of requirement? But music's a bit too loud. All right, let's turn it down a little bit. Or I don't think it's too loud, is it? It's pretty low on here already. Let me know. For the first time, he wished he were clothed. Oh wait, this all happened? He stood up, looking around. Was he in some great room of requirement? The longer he looked, the more there was to see. A great domed glass roof glittering high above him in sunlight. Perhaps it was a palace. All was hushed and still, except for those odd thumping and whimpering noises coming from somewhere close by in the midst. Harry turned slowly on the spot, and his surroundings seemed to invent themselves before his eyes. A wide open space, bright and clean. A hall larger by far than the great hall, with that clear domed glass ceiling. It was quite empty. He was the only person there, except for... He recoiled. He had spotted the thing that was making the noises. It had the form of a small, naked child, curled on the ground. its skin raw and rough, flayed-looking, and it lay shuddering under a seat where it had been left, unwanted, stuffed out of sight, struggling for breath. He was afraid of it. Is this baby Voldemort again? Because, book 3? Where there's baby Voldemort that gets resurrected? Seems like it. He was afraid of it, small and fragile and wounded though it was. He did not want to approach it. Nevertheless, he drew slowly nearer, ready to jump back at any moment. Soon he stood near enough to touch it. Yeah, because if he's dead, then Voldemort's dead too. Is this the Netherworld? Yet he could not bring himself to do it. He felt like a coward. He ought to comfort it, but it repulsed him. You could not help. He spun around. Albus Dumbledore was walking towards him. Sprightly and upright, wearing sweeping robes of midnight blue. This must be heaven or something. There's going to be a scene between Albus and him?
Harry.
He spread his arms wide. His hands were both whole and white and undamaged.
You wonderful boy. You brave, brave man. Let us walk.
This is awesome. This is great. Ah. Stunned, Harry followed as Dumbledore strode away from where the flayed child lay whimpering, leading him to 2 seats that Harry had not previously noticed, set some distance away under that high sparkling ceiling. Dumbledore sat down in one of them, and Harry fell into the other, staring at his old headmaster's face. Dumbledore's long silver hair and beard, the piercingly blue eyes behind half-moon spectacles, the crooked nose. Everything was as he had remembered it. And yet... "You're dead," said Harry.
Oh, yes,
said Dumbledore matter-of-factly. "Then... I'm dead too."
Ah,
said Dumbledore, smiling still more broadly. There you go, there you go. He's got this... He's got the top of his nose, doesn't he? He's got it right there.
that is the question, isn't it? On the whole, dear boy, I think not.
They looked at each other, the old man still beaming. "Not?" repeated Harry.
Not,
said Dumbledore. But Harry raised his hand instinctively towards the lightning scar. It did not seem to be there. "But I should have died. I didn't defend myself. I meant to let him kill me."
and that,
said Dumbledore.
will, I think, have made all the difference.
Happiness seemed to radiate from Dumbledore like light, like fire. Harry had never seen the man so utterly, so palpably content. "Explain," said Harry.
But you already know.
Said Dumbledore. He twiddled his thumbs together. "I let him kill me," said Harry. "Didn't I?"
You did.
Said Dumbledore, nodding.
Go on.
It's just... Dumbledore's the same. He's like, "I'm not gonna give you answers. You figure it out with your own personality." Dumbledore, he's back. It's the same character. "So the part of his soul that was in me..." Dumbledore nodded still more enthusiastically, urging Harry onwards, a broad smile of encouragement on his face. "Has it gone?"
Oh, yes,
said Dumbledore.
yes. He destroyed it. Your soul is whole and completely your own, Harry.
But then Harry glanced over his shoulder to where the small, maimed creature trembled under the chair. "What is that, Professor?"
Something that is beyond either of our help,
said Dumbledore. But if Voldemort used the killing curse, Harry started again, and nobody died for me this time, how can I be alive?
I think you know,
said Dumbledore.
Think back. Remember what he did in his ignorance, in his greed, in his cruelty?
Harry thought. He let his gaze drift over his surroundings. If it was indeed a palace in which they sat, it was an odd one, with chairs set in little rows and bits of railing here and there. And still he and Dumbledore and the stunted creature under the chair were the only beings there. Then the answer rose to his lips easily, without effort. He took my blood, said Harry.
Precisely,
said Dumbledore.
He took your blood and rebuilt his living body with it. Your blood in his veins, Harry. Lily's protection inside both of you. He tethered you to life while he lives.
I live while he lives? But I thought it was the other way round. I thought we both had to die, or... Is it the same thing? Wait 1 second. He took your blood and rebuilt his living body with it. Your blood in his veins, Harry. Was this... Wait, can you just... oh, gosh. I know my memory, but also, first time reading it. When did he take Harry's blood? Was that in book 3? No, when did he take his blood? I'm a bit confused. Remember back in Dumbledore's office after the graveyard in book 4, when Harry mentioned Voldemort taking his blood, and Harry thought he saw triumph in Dumbledore's eyes for a moment. Okay, yes, gotcha, in the graveyard. That was what I was thinking of. And that's how he rebuilt himself. Okay, he took your blood and rebuilt his living body with him. Your blood in his veins, Harry. Lily's protection inside both of you. He tethered you to life while he lives. I live while he lives. He tethered you to life while he lives. He tethered you to life while he lives. No, but Harry was already alive. It's more like Voldemort's tethered to life while Harry lives, shouldn't it be? I live while he lives, but I thought it was the other way around. I thought we both had to die, or is it the same thing? He was distracted by the whimpering and thumping of the agonized creature behind them, and glanced back at it yet again. The blood of the enemy forcibly taken. Right. Right. And you're sure we can't do anything?
There is no help possible.
Then explain more, said Harry. Are you hearing that, baby? And Dumbledore smiled. Well, these protections for Harry alone. Tom is just holding it for him. Gotcha. Gotcha very much. Got you very much. We'll just wait a moment, or maybe I can ask them to close the door. I'll just ask them to close them more. It's Voldy crying down the hall. Oh, that's kind of... Maybe I'll just leave it for now. It's kind of fitting, isn't it? It's kind of fitting. Then explain more, said Harry, and Dumbledore smiled.
You were the 7th Horcrux, Harry. The Horcrux he never meant to make. He had rendered his soul so unstable that it broke apart when he committed those acts of unspeakable evil. The murder of your parents, the attempted killing of a child. But what escaped from that room was even less than he knew. He left more than his body behind. He left part of himself latched to you, the would-be victim who had survived, and his knowledge remained woefully incomplete, Harry. That which Voldemort does not value, he takes no trouble to comprehend. Of house elves and children's tales, of love, loyalty, and innocence, Voldemort knows and understands nothing. Nothing. That they all have a power beyond his own, a power beyond the reach of any magic, is a truth he has never grasped. He took your blood, believing it would strengthen him. He took it into his own body, a tiny part of the enchantment your mother laid upon you when she died for you. His body keeps her sacrifice alive. And while that enchantment survives, so do you. And so does Voldemort's one last hope for himself.
Dumbledore smiled at Harry, and Harry stared at him. And you knew this. You knew all along.
I guessed. But my guesses have usually been good,
said Dumbledore happily. What a guy! The stake of the entire wizarding world.
I guessed.
Said Dumbledore happily, and they sat in silence for what seemed like a long time, while the creature behind them continued to whimper and tremble. "There's more," said Harry. "There's more to it. Why did my wand break the wand? Why did my wand break the wand he borrowed?"
As to that, I cannot be sure.
"Have a guess, then," said Harry, and Dumbledore laughed.
Oh. What you must understand, Harry, is that you and Lord Voldemort have journeyed together into realms of magic hitherto unknown and untested. But here is what I think happened, and it is precise, and it is unprecedented, and no wand-maker could, I think, ever have predicted or explained it to Voldemort.
I would also like Harry to ask, where the heck are we? What is this place? That's what I would like to figure out.
Without meaning to, as you know, Lord Voldemort doubled the bond between you when he returned to human form. A part of his soul was still attached to yours, and thinking to strengthen himself, he took a part of your mother's sacrifice into himself. If you could only have understood the precise and terrible power of that sacrifice, he would not, perhaps, have dared to touch your blood. But then, if he had been able to understand, he could not be Lord Voldemort, and might never have murdered at all. Having ensured this twofold connection, having wrapped your destinies together more securely than ever two wizards were joined in history, Voldemort proceeded to attack you with a wand that shared a core with yours. And now, something very strange happened, as we know. The cores retracted in a way that Lord Voldemort, who never knew that your wand was twin of his, had never expected. He was more afraid than you were that night, Harry. You had accepted, even embraced, the possibility of death. Something Lord Voldemort has never been able to do. Your courage won. Your wand overpowered his, and in doing so, something happened between those wands, something that echoed the relationship between their masters. I believe that your wand imbibed some of the power and qualities of Voldemort's wand that night, which is to say that it contained a little of Voldemort himself. So your wand recognized him when he pursued you, recognized a man who's both kin and mortal enemy, and it regurgitated some of his own magic against him. Magic much more powerful than anything Lucius wand had ever performed. Your wand now contained the power of your enormous courage, and of Voldemort's own deadly skill. What chance did that poor stick of Lucius Malfoy stand?
But if my wand was so powerful, how come Hermione was able to break it? Asked Harry.
My dear boy, its remarkable effects were directed only at Voldemort, who had tampered so ill-advisedly with the deepest laws of magic. Only towards him was that wand abnormally powerful. Otherwise, it was a wand like any other. Though a good one, I'm sure.
Dumbledore finished kindly. Harry sat in thought for a long time, or perhaps seconds. It was very hard to be sure of things like that, like time here. Okay. Just a brief overview of this. That night, he wrapped both their destinies together and continued to attack him with a wand that shared a core with yours. And nothing strange happened, as we know. The cores reacted in a way that Lord Voldemort didn't expect. He was more afraid. Harry embraced the possibility of death, something that Lord Voldemort didn't do. Your courage wand, your wand overpowered his. So I guess acceptance of death gives you more power. Or no, he had fear. He didn't have fear. In doing so, something happened between those wands that echoed the relationship between their masters. So the wands were linked as well. Not only the masters, but the wand. I believe that your wand imbibed some of the qualities and powers of Voldemort's wand, which say they contain a little bit of Voldemort himself. So your wand recognized him when he pursued you, recognized a man who was both kin and mortal enemy, and it regurgitated some of his own magic against him. Magic more powerful than anything Lucius's wand had ever performed. Your wand contained the power of your enormous courage and of Voldemort's own deadly skill. Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Wow. Harry sat and thought for a long time, or perhaps seconds. It was very hard to be sure of things like time here. He killed me with your wand.
He failed to kill you with my wand,
Dumbledore corrected Harry.
I think we can agree that you are not dead. Though, of course, he added, as if fearing he had been discourteous, I do not minimize your sufferings, which I'm sure were severe.
I feel great at the moment, though, said Harry, looking down at his clean, unblemished hands. Where are we exactly? Yes, please.
Well, I was going to ask you that,
said Dumbledore, looking around.
Where would you say that we are?
Until Dumbledore had asked, Harry had not known. Now, however, he found that he had an answer ready to give. Now, however, he found that he had an answer ready to give. It looks, he said slowly, like King's Cross Station, except a lot cleaner and empty. And there are no trains as far as I can see.
King's Cross Station?
Dumbledore was chuckling immoderately.
Good gracious. Really?
Well, where do you think we are? Asked Harry, a little defensively.
My dear boy, I have no idea. This is, as they say, your party.
Oh, what an old dude. Harry had no idea what this meant. Dumbledore was being infuriating. He glared at him and remembered a much more pressing question than that of their current location. The Deathly Hallows, he said, and he was glad to see that the words wiped the smile from Dumbledore's face.
Ah, yes,
he said, even looked a little worried. Well, For the first time since Harry had met Dumbledore, he looked less than an old man, much less. He looked, fleetingly, like a small boy caught in wrongdoing.
"Can you forgive me?" he said. "Can you forgive me for not trusting you, for not telling you? Harry, I only feared that you would fail as I had failed. I only dreaded that you would make my mistakes. I crave your pardon, Harry. I have known for some time now that you are the better man."
Wow. It's a man with flaws trying to do his best, and still failing. "What are you talking about?" asked Harry, startled by Dumbledore's tone, with sudden tears in his eyes.
The Hallows,
murmured Dumbledore.
"A desperate man's dream."
"But they're real."
"Real and dangerous, and a lure for fools,"
said Dumbledore.
"And I was such a fool. But you know, don't you? I have no secrets from you anymore. You know."
What do I know? Dumbledore turned his whole body to face Harry, and tears still sparkled in the brilliantly blue eyes.
"Master of my death, Harry. Master of death. Was I better, ultimately, than Voldemort?"
"Of course you were," said Harry. "Of course. How can you ask that? You never killed if you could avoid it."
True,
said Dumbledore, and he was like a child seeking reassurance.
"Yet I, too, sought a way to conquer death, Harry."
"Not the way he did," said Harry. After all his anger at Dumbledore, how odd it was to sit here, beneath the high vaulted ceiling, and defend Dumbledore from himself. Hallows, not Horcruxes.
"Hallows,"
murmured Dumbledore.
"not Horcruxes." "Precisely."
There was a pause. The creature behind them whimpered, but Harry no longer looked around. "Grindelwald was looking for them too?" he asked. Dumbledore closed his eyes for a moment and nodded.
"It was the thing, after all, that drew us together,"
he said quietly.
"Two clever, arrogant boys with a shared obsession. He wanted to come to Godric's Hollow, as I am sure you have guessed, because of the grave of Ignotus Peverell. He wanted to explore the place the third brother had died."
"So it's true?" asked Harry. "All of it? The Peverell brothers?"
"Well, the three brothers of the tale,"
said Dumbledore, nodding.
"Oh, yes, I think so. Whether they met death on a lonely road, I think it more likely that the Peverell brothers were simply gifted, dangerous wizards who succeeded in creating those powerful objects. The story of them being Death's own hallows seemed to me the sort of legend that might have sprung up around such creations. The cloak, as you know now, travelled down through the ages, father to son, mother to daughter, right down to Ignotus's last living descendant, who was born, as Ignotus was, in the village of Godric's Hollow."
Dumbledore smiled at Harry. "Me? Oh, so he's a descendant. What?" Oh, crazy. Okay.
You have guessed, I know, why the cloak was in my possession on the night your parents died. James had shown it to me just a few days previously. It explained much of his undetected wrongdoing at school.
Oh, he used it at school all the time.
I could hardly believe what I was seeing. I asked to borrow it, to examine it. I had long since given up my dream of uniting the Hallows, but I could not resist. Could not help taking a closer look. It was a cloak the likes of which I had never seen, immensely old, perfect in every respect. And then your father died, and I had 2 Hallows at last, all to myself.
His tone was unbearably bitter. The cloak wouldn't have helped them survive, though, Harry said quickly. Voldemort knew where my mum and dad were. The cloak couldn't have made them curse-proof.
True, sighed Voldemort, true.
Harry waited. But Dumbledore did not speak, so he prompted him. So you'd given up looking for the Hallows when you saw the cloak?
Oh, yes,
said Dumbledore faintly. It seemed that he forced himself to meet Harry's eyes.
You know what happened. You know. You cannot despise me more than I despise myself.
But I don't despise you.
And you should,
said Dumbledore. He drew a deep breath.
You know the secret of my sister's ill health. What those muggles did. What she became. You know how my poor father sought revenge and paid the price, died in Azkaban. You know how my mother gave up her own life to care for Ariana. I resented it, Harry.
Dumbledore stated it baldly, coldly. He was looking now, over the top of Harry's head, into the distance.
I was gifted. I was brilliant. I wanted to escape. I wanted to shine. I wanted glory. Do not misunderstand me,
he said, and pain crossed the face so that he looked ancient again.
I loved them. I loved my parents. I loved my brother and my sister. But I was selfish, Harry. More selfish than you, who are a remarkably selfless person could possibly imagine. So that when my mother died and I was left the responsibility of a damaged sister and a wayward brother, I returned to my village in anger and bitterness. Trapped and wasted, I thought. And then, of course, he came.
Dumbledore looked directly into Harry's eyes again.
Grindelwald. You cannot imagine how his ideas caught me, Harry. It flamed me. Muggles forced into subservience. We wizards, triumphant, Grindelwald and I, the glorious young leaders of the revolution. Oh, I had a few scruples. I assuaged my conscience with empty words It would all be for the greater good, and any harm done would be repaid 100-fold in benefits for wizards. Did I know, in my heart of hearts, what Gellert Grindelwald was? I think I did, but I closed my eyes. The plans we were making came to fruition, all my dreams would come true. And at the heart of our schemes, the Deathly Hallows. How they fascinated him, how they fascinated both of us. The unbeatable wand, the weapon that would lead us to power. The resurrection stone, to him, though I pretended not to know it, it meant an army of Inferi. To me, I confess, it meant the return of my parents, and the lifting of all responsibility from my shoulders. And the cloak. Somehow we never discussed the cloak much, Harry. Both of us could conceal ourselves well enough without the cloak. The true magic of which, of course, is that it can be used to protect and shield others as well as its owner. I thought that if we ever found it, it might be useful in hiding Ariana. But our interest in the cloak was mainly that it completed the trio. The legend said that the man who united all three objects would then be truly master of death, which we took to mean invincible. Invincible masters of death, Grindelwald and Dumbledore. 2 months of insanity, of cruel dreams and neglect. The only 2 members my family left to me. And then, you know what happened. Reality returned, in the form of my rough, unlettered, and infinitely more admirable brother. I did not want to hear the truths he shouted at me. I did not want to hear that I could not set forth to seek Hallows with a fragile and unstable sister in tow. The argument became a fight. Grindelwald lost control, that which I had always sensed in him, though I pretended not to, now sprang into terrible being, and Ariana. After all my mother's care and caution, lay dead upon the floor.
Dumbledore gave a little gasp and began to cry in earnest. Harry reached out, was glad to find that he could touch him. He gripped his arm tightly, and Dumbledore gradually regained control.
Well, Grindelwald fled, as anyone but I could have predicted. He vanished, with his plans for seizing power and his schemes for Muggle torture, and his dreams of the Deathly Hallows, dreams in which I had encouraged him and helped him. He ran, while I was left to bury my sister and learn to live with my guilt and my terrible grief, the price of my shame. Years passed. There were rumors about him. They said he had procured a wand of immense power. I, meanwhile, was offered the post of Minister for Magic. Not once, but several times. Naturally, I refused. I'd learned that I was not to be trusted with power.
But you'd have been better, much better than Fudge or Scrimger, burst out Harry.
Would I?
asked Dumbledore heavily.
I am not so sure. I had proven as a very young man that power was my weakness and my temptation. It is a curious thing, Harry, that perhaps those who are best suited to power are those who have never sought it. Those who, like you, have leadership thrust upon them and taken up the mantle because they must, and find it to their own surprise that they wear it well. I was safe at Hogwarts. I think I was a good teacher.
You were the best.
You are very kind, Harry. But while I busied myself with the training of young wizards, Grindelwald was raising an army. They say he feared me, and perhaps he did. But less, I think, than I feared him. Oh, not death,
said Dumbledore, in answer to Harry's questioning look.
Not what he could do to me magically. I knew that we were evenly matched, perhaps that I was a shade more skillful. It was the truth I feared. You see, I never knew which of us, in that last horrific fight, had actually cast the curse that killed my sister. You may call me cowardly. You would be right. Harry, I dreaded beyond all things the knowledge that it had been I who brought about her death, not merely through my arrogance and stupidity, but that I actually struck the blow that snuffed out her life. I think he knew it. I think he knew what frightened me. I delayed meeting him until finally it would have been too shameful to resist any longer. People were dying, and he seemed unstoppable, and I had to do what I could. Well, you know what happened next. I won the duel. I won the wand.
Another silence. Harry did not ask whether Dumbledore had ever found out who struck Ariana dead. He did not want to know, and even less less did he want Dumbledore to have to tell him. It was him. It was Dumbledore. It was Dumbledore. That's horrible. At last he knew what Dumbledore would have seen when he looked in the mirror of Erised, and why Dumbledore had been so understanding of the fascination it had exercised over Harry. 1 second. They sat in silence for a long time, and the whimperings of the creature behind them barely disturbed Harry any more. At last he said, Grindelwald tried to stop Voldemort going after the wand. He lied, you know, pretended he never had it. Dumbledore nodded, looking down at his lap, his tears still glittering on the crooked nose.
They say he showed remorse in later years, alone in his cell at Normangaard. I hope that is true. I would like to think he did feel the horror and shame of what he had done. Perhaps that lie to Voldemort was his attempt to make amends, to prevent Voldemort from taking the Hollow.
Or maybe from breaking into your tomb, suggested Harry, and Dumbledore dabbed his eyes. After another short pause, Harry said, You tried to use the Resurrection Stone. Dumbledore nodded.
When I discovered it, after all those years, buried in the abandoned home of the Gaunts, the Hallow I craved most of all, though in my youth I had wanted it for very different reasons. I lost my head, Harry. I quite forgot that it was now a Horcrux, that the ring was sure to carry a curse. I picked it up and I put it on. And for a second, I imagined that I was about to see Ariana and my mother and my father, and to tell them how very, very sorry I was. I was such a fool, Harry. After all those years, I had learned nothing. I was unworthy to unite the Deathly Hallows. I proved it time and again, and here was final proof.
Why? Said Harry. It was natural. You wanted to see them again. What's wrong with that?
Maybe a man in a million could unite the Hallows, Harry. I was fit only to possess the meanest of them, the least extraordinary. I was to fit the Elder Wand, and not to boast of it, and not to kill with it. I was permitted to tame and to use it, because I took it, not for gain, but to save others from it. But the cloak I took out of vain curiosity, and so it could never have worked for me as it worked for you. It's true, Ona. The stone I would have used in an attempt to drag back those who are at peace, rather to enable my self-sacrifice, as you did. You are the worthy possessor of the Hallows.
Dumbledore patted Harry's hand, and Harry looked up at the old man and smiled. He could not help himself. How could he remain angry with Dumbledore now? Why did you have to make it so difficult? Dumbledore's smile was tremulous. One second. Why did you have to make it so difficult? Sorry, this is... Oh, it's being weird for me. Okay, there we go. Dumbledore's smile was tremulous.
I am afraid I counted on Miss Granger to slow you up, Harry. I was afraid that your hot head might dominate your good heart. I was scared that, if presented outright with the facts about those tempting objects, you might seize the Hallows, as I did, at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. You laid hands on them. I wanted you to possess them safely. You are the true master of death, because the true master does not seek to run away from death. He accepts that he must die, and understands that there are far, far worse things in the living world than dying.
And Voldemort never knew about the Hallows.
I do not think so, because he did not recognize the resurrection stone he turned into a Horcrux. But even if he had known about them, Harry, I doubt that he would have been interested in any except the first. He would not think that he needed the cloak, and as for the stone, whom would he have wanted to bring back from the dead? He fears the dead. He does not love.
But you expected him to go after the wand.
I have been sure that he would try, ever since your wand beat Voldemort's in the graveyard of Little Hangleton. At first, he was afraid that you had conquered him by superior skill. Once he had kidnapped Ollivander, however, he discovered the existence of the twin cores. He thought that explained everything. Yet the borrowed wand did no better against yours. So Voldemort, instead of asking himself what quality it was in you that had made your wand so strong, what gift you possessed that he did not, naturally set out to find the one wand that, they said, would beat any other. For him, the Elder Wand has become an obsession, to rival his obsession with you. He believes that the Elder Wand removes his last weakness and makes him truly invincible. Poor Severus.
If you planned your death with Snape, you meant him to end up with the Elder Wand, didn't you?
I admit that was my intention,
said Dumbledore,
did not work as I intended, did it?
No, said Harry. That bit didn't work out. The creature behind them jerked and moaned, and Harry and Dumbledore sat without talking for the longest time yet. The realization of what would happen next settled gradually over Harry in the long minutes, like softly falling snow. I've got to go back, haven't I?
That is up to you.
I've got a choice?
Oh, yes.
Dumbledore smiled at him.
We are not in King's Cross, you say? I think that if you decided not to go back, you would be able to, let's say, board a train.
And where would it take me?
On,
said Dumbledore simply. Silence again. Voldemort's got the Elder Wand.
True. Voldemort has the Elder Wand.
But you want me to go back?
I think,
said Dumbledore,
that if you choose to return, there is a chance that he may be finished for good. I cannot promise it, but I know this, Harry, that you have less to fear from returning here than he does.
Harry glanced again at the raw-looking thing that trembled and choked in the shadow beneath the distant chair.
Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love. By returning, you may ensure that fewer souls are maimed, fewer families are torn apart. If that seems to you a worthy goal, then we say goodbye for the present.
Harry nodded and sighed. Leaving this place would not be nearly as hard as walking into the forest had been. But it was warm and light and peaceful here, and he knew that he was heading back to pain and the fear of more loss. He stood up, and Dumbledore did the same, and they looked for a long moment into each other's faces. Tell me one last thing, said Harry. Is this real? Or has this been happening inside my head? Dumbledore beamed at him, and his voice sounded loud and strong in Harry's ears, even though the bright mist was ascending again, obscuring his figure.
Of course, it is happening inside your head, Harry. But why on earth should that mean that it is not real?
I love that line. I love that line. What a chapter. What an amazing chapter. Wow. We got so much Voldemort. We got all the history. We got to forgive Voldemort. Dumbledore. I'm sorry. Dumbledore. And that last line, amazing. Just talking about the imagination. Things in your head. And love conquers the day. Hey everybody, I'll leave time for one or two questions, but I need to end now. I'm very happy about this chapter. This chapter makes me feel really happy, warm, content. It was sad. I was really feeling Dumbledore's loss during that. Oh, I feel his regret and loss that he's carrying this. Man. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the compliments. Okay. I will talk about this last part. Well, I don't know what much to say. It's all self-explanatory. I think it's all laid up. There's no more mystery, at least not to me. It's all been laid out. I'm, as Harry was, pissed at Dumbledore at various times throughout the chapters, but this kind of trumps everything. I'm like, you are flawed. And I think that's one of the beautiful, beautiful things about Dumbledore. And that I think, I like to read art that really speaks to me, that I connect to, and not only like, oh, that was beautiful. Although sometimes that's just the purpose, it's just something being beautiful. But sometimes I like to reflect on it. What does it mean? And to really, I mean, especially nowadays, he always sees the good in others. He tries to see the good, and he says loss and brokenness makes people the way they are. He tries to see the best in people. And I think that's something that we can learn from these times. We are more divided than we ever have been. Ever, at least in my lifetime. And people are quick to judge, quick to hate. And I would just like to encourage us, learning from Dumbledore, to look at the good. Try and find the good and try and encourage that rather than hate the bad in a person. If you were going to play a character in the Harryverse, who do you think you're most suited to play? I'm currently aged? My age? Maybe Lupin or Sirius? Something like that? Or, I don't know how old they are. Do you remember how you felt about the books when you first started the first book? Yeah, I was just kind of like, oh, these are kids' books. People really like them. You know, I know there's 7 books, lots of lore. But man, this is the most emotional book I've ever read. Will Mark join you for your next reading? Yes, he will. All right, I need to go. Much love. We will see each other tomorrow evening again for Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. I'm assuming it's going to be the final fight, and I'll probably end it. I don't know how long it's going to go, but much love. Bye-bye.